Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a Goosebumps talk type of video. And in today's video, we're going to be discussing the top 5 Goosebumps books with cult followings. Now, to kind of preface this video is going to be about criteria I put forth into establishing which books I think deserve to be on this list. Now, some of you might see some of the books I'm put on here like, oh, well, those books aren't the greatest books with cult followings, and I understand. But for this video, I wanted to highlight the 5 books that are popular and have cult followings, but not necessarily people out there clamoring that they're the best all the time. But there are enough people out there, praising the songs of these books. Now, in traditional terms, there are 5 books I set aside before we begin with the real list I made that kind of coincide with what it means to be a cult-like book, in my opinion. So to me, there's 3 things that kind of eliminate it, right? If a book is one of the definitive books from the original 62, or spawned a franchise that went through all the way through the franchise, you know what I mean? Or even in like Series 2000, those were disqualified, in my opinion. If books have made it to classic Goosebumps in Wave 1 or Wave 2, specifically classic Goosebumps, they were disqualified. If they had an adaptation in the Goosebumps graphics, disqualified. The only things I allowed for consideration here are books that are just standalone books. They don't have a Goosebumps graphics adaptation. They don't have a classic Goosebumps reprint. They can have a book 10 reprint because that's obscure enough. They could have an episode from back in the day, or they could have a 2003 reprint. Only because the 2003 reprint lineup was not reprinted in full with the classic Goosebumps reprints to update them. So I let it slide. Okay. But in traditional terms, these 5 are probably the biggest, well-known books with cult followings. And these kind of have transcended being obscure and niche and have become kind of more popular. And it's kind of a oxymoron to say this, that they have a cult following, because they're definitely some of the more popular Goosebumps books now. It's definitely to seasoned readers. Maybe not to casuals and normies who put, the first 3 Night of the Living Dummy books and the Haunted Mask book and One Day at Horrorland and, the typical stuff you see in normie top 10s. That, besides those people, you'll see Calling All Creeps. Calling All Creeps has a reputation. Most of these books kind of follow this. They're kind of divisive, but there's humongous following for them. Calling All Creeps is one. The Haunted School is another. Both of these books have been reprinted in the past. This book was put in a book 10. Books like these just kind of, transcend the realm of obscurity when so many people have passed the praises of these books, and so many people have put these books in their top 10s and top 5s at this point, that I think it's kind of a shame to put them in a true top 5 for cult followings, because I think these, like I said, these books have achieved mainstream status. But that even goes to some books that haven't been reprinted, like the case of Werewolf Skin. Yeah, this book has never been reprinted whatsoever, and it's still kind of obscure in regards to who has access to it and who can read it. But this book, I think, has an ebook, and I think this book has become one of the more mainstream popular ones. When people talk about some of their favorite original 62 books, this is another common one that comes up. This is not something you don't hear all the time. So that's the thing. And then, even in Series 2000, right? Series 2000, you hear about Jekyll and Hyde. Jekyll and Hyde doesn't have a reprint either, but this is, out of the ones that get talked about the most in Series 2000, this one commonly, I hear, gets brought up as the best one from the series. Even though it's not the most talked about. It's not the most talked about like Slappy's Nightmare, or Cry the Cat, or Bride of the Living Dummy, or even The Haunted Car, or Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls for that matter, but it is brought up quite significantly, right? And it's transcended itself a little bit. And probably the most famous cult following book of all time, this book has seen price increases dramatically because of people wanting to get the book just to read it, not let alone collect it. I Live in Your Basement, never been reprinted. The most likely book to never be reprinted, but it's become a cult phenomenon in the Goosebumps community. So many people, I've seen so many people call this book a masterpiece. I've seen so many people put this book as S tier rankings. I've seen so many people put this in their top 5 of all time. It's transcended being a cult following. It's transcended. So these are like the five I consider that have transcended, the level of just being niche and obscure. Maybe at one point these were, but I've seen just too many people, too many people out there. Now these next 5, this is my true list of books with cult followings. Okay, and I kind of ordered them from size, so from the smallest to the largest that I've noticed. Okay. And these are what I would call traditionally books to be considered with cult followings, because they're not the most popular books. They're actually more inherently divisive. There's very love or hate relationships between fans, between these books. But the fans who do love it go to bat for them and they stick up for them. So, I'll start off with this one because I think I'll be too biased if I put it any higher. But number 5 goes to Are You Terrified Yet? Yeah, another Series 2000 book that does not get mentioned at all in conversations, hardly, unless people are talking in context of what's the top 10. This one's probably going to be in most people's top 10 of the series. There are some people who will say that they hate this book or call it one of the worst Goosebumps books of all time. And then there's people that say it's one of the undersung hidden gems of the entire series. Like, this is a great book, one of the most underrated Goosebumps books. It deserves way more love, deserves way more attention. Possibly even one of the all-time greats of Series 2000, top 5 material. There's a lot of people out there going to bat for this book. I'm one of the select few. I'm probably one of the unicorns out there that'll say that this is one of my all-time favorite Goosebumps books, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's more out there. I just see a lot of people going to bat for this book. That's all I'm saying. A lot of people really love this one. I've actually seen people convince people who didn't like the book to reconsider, and they actually changed their minds and ended up liking the book more. So this book has a lot of power for people, especially fans. If fans can convince other people to re-examine something, and they can totally recontextualize this book into something else, that's great and that's powerful. And this book definitely is going to probably see a bigger cult following growing as the years go on and as more people acquire this and start reading this. So, yeah. Are You Terrified Yet is number 5. And number 4, this is another fan favorite from the original 62 that quite hasn't achieved some of the success of some other books like I Live in Your Basement or Werewolf Skin or The Haunted School because it's so divisive. And I think this one probably would be, a permanent situation here where it's probably never going to transcend where it's at. But it does have a massive cult following to it, and it's The Beast from the East. Yeah, a lot of people don't like how this book lays out its story. People don't like the randomness to it. People sometimes don't even like the characters. But then there's people who really think this book is fun. It's like a game going on in the story. It's very creative and imaginative, and it feels so different and unique for the series. And people love it because it has charm, and it's fun and exhilarating, and kind of wacky. Yeah, this is more on the lackadaisical, lighthearted, fun, adventurous type of Goosebumps books that specific readers look for. It's more niche than usual, but it has a huge following. I've seen many people give this book 5 out of 5s, say that's one of their all-time favorites, even put it as like in the top 5 of all time, of all Goosebumps books. So yeah, there's some diehard fans out there for this, and you'd be shocked if you didn't believe it. So Yeah, this has a book tin re-release, and I think the book tin it was released in was the Monster Blood one, and I think that's probably the least popular. But it's kind of a shame. It should be in a better book tin, in my opinion. But hey, it's at least with Night and Terror Tower and stuff. If you want to check this out, and you go to your Barnes and Noble or something, you see a book tin, the purple one, pick this up for this book. It's fun. I would recommend it. Number 3, a lot of you viewers of mine love this book, and you made it well known to me. So I actually made this video in spirit just for this book, because I've seen a lot of people tell me that this is one of their all-time favorite Goosebumps books. And it's How to Kill a Monster. Who would have thought that this book has a massive cult following the way it does? You know, I've seen on some hands, I've never really seen anybody say that this book is one of the worst Goosebumps books of all time, but I have seen people say that it's one of the more forgettable or mediocre books. Nothing really terrible, but nothing really good either. But on the other side of the coin, there's people who just go to bat for this book all the time, say, "Oh, this book's fantastic. It's probably one of their favorite monsters." What is it, the Bog Monster? I've seen many people say the Bog Monster is one of their favorites. I've seen plenty of people say that they love the setting and the atmosphere of the book. They love the concept. They think it's fun. They think it's kind of gruesome and dark and humorous all in the same time. Many people have put this in their top 5 of all time. Many people have put this as their favorite book. I've seen it. And it has a pretty decent sized cult following. I've seen a lot more people praise this over Beast from the East. That's why I put it higher. But yeah, people love this. And they want a sequel for it too. So go figure. Yeah. I have to reread this because I can't really remember a lot about it off the top of my head. But yeah, a lot of you love it. So I'll include it here. Definitely recognize it. Now, these top 2 are definitely the most noticeable in the community. 2 very love it or hate it books. The 2 most love or hated on this true list here. This one, fans of this book I have seen get very opinionated when people bash this, and they'll go to bat for it. They'll defend this book until the day they die, probably. And then there's some people that just really hate this book and just don't care for it or don't like it. But like I said, that seems to be the trend with this bottom 5 here, with this top 5 list. So number 2 is Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. Piano Lessons Can Be Murder is another book that's had a book tin re-release, but no classic Goosebumps re-release. And it's one of those more obscure books, especially from the first 16. From the first 16, I mean, the 2 that get talked about the least, I think, in the grand scheme of conversation, are probably this book and maybe the original Monster Blood. I see people not talking about that book and not talking about this one a lot, but when people do talk about this one, you see such a division of opinion. You see people that hate the main character. They think that there's some controversial bits to this book, especially dealing with the main villain and how wild this book gets and how kind of random it feels. But then some people think that this book is just very dark, has this mood and tone to it that just carry throughout the book. They like the twists and turns. They like how random it gets. They think it's kind of creative. It's kind of sinister. And it just hits. And this book has its followers, y'all. This book has its dedicated fandom. I have yet to review this on the channel, but this is the book that got me back into Goosebumps after I took a couple years, off from the series. When I was probably 13 or 14. And when I saw the episode for the first time ever, it made me fall in love with the show again, too. So the story has a lot of power for me. I don't know if I can speak on it too, unbiasedly. But yeah, I know a lot of people who don't like this one. But it's deserved here. It does have a massive cult following. You will see a lot of people defend this one. So yeah, Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. But the top one, this one definitely, I've seen video essays of people saying why this book is the greatest Goosebumps book of all time. And then I've seen people make the top 5 worst Goosebumps books of all time and completely bash this book. and there's such a big correlation with opinions on this and attitudes towards it, and it's understandably so. It's one of the books that it's so close to transcending into the 5 I mentioned here. It's so close, but I don't ever see it not being as divisive as it is, just based on what the story brings and offers. But it's How I Learned to Fly. How I Learned to Fly has a huge dedicated fan base to it. A lot of people really praise this book for it, the writing, the storytelling ability, the commentary of the story, and where the story goes. They really appreciate the messages and the themes and how deep it gets. But on the other side of the spectrum, there's some people attacking this book. This book is not scary. That's an understandable thing. They think it's boring. They think it's generic. They think it's kind of stupid. Very forced in some areas. You know, I've heard many criticisms towards the book. But this book has a massive fan base. I've seen this book, and many people I respect out there, many people I respect, have this book in their top 10 of all time. I don't know if it's in my top 10, but I even gave this book a 5 out of 5. I just have to give this book credit where it's due. It's just a well-written book, in my opinion, but the cult outcry for this, you'd be shocked. Especially if you're watching this video and you haven't read Goosebumps in a while, but you remember maybe you had a negative opinion about this book. I tell you what, go on Goose Twitter, go on Goose Reddit, go in the Goosebumps Discord, and ask people, what do you think about How I Learned to Fly? And I guarantee you, people were like, oh, that book's fantastic. And then you'll have some people say, it was all right, or then you'll have some people say, it sucked. It goes all over the place, but you'll be shocked by how many people will tell you that it's one of the greatest. I mean, there's so many people out there that support this book. It has a massive cult following. It's definitely overshadowed by other books. Not the most popular book out ever, but I've heard many people say that this is one of the underrated or one of the understated best books of the series of all time. So, yeah, these are the 5 books I would actually say are the books with cult followings out there that are worth talking about, because I don't think they're probably ever going to leave where they're at and transcend these books here, unless there's more Goosebumps fans over time, or unless they reprint some of these books so more people can get access to them or anything. But yeah, that's my video talking about the top 5 Goosebumps books with cult followings. Let me know down in the comment section, which 5 books would you have included? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.